excited about what we have in our closing session. We're going to have some excellent opportunity to hear from others about what they have gathered from this week. We're going to hear about the George Cobb Lifetime Award, and we'll learn about what's going to be happening in eCOTS. I know I'm really excited about those plans as well. I hope you are as well. So let's just do a short warm up. So we've been warming up for this question all week. And so my question is, so how do we prepare the modern student? So this is a poll everywhere question. And hopefully what's going to happen is you can type in how you prepare them, but then you can also upvote what you think are those important things on how we prepare the modern student. So we should be able to see those questions coming in and also be able to upvote what we think are those important characteristics. All right, here they come. So help them experience the entire data analysis process. Multivariate data. Oh, this is awesome. Coding, data cycle, computing, embracing technology. I saw authentic assessment coming in. Understanding concepts. Data ethics. Interactive graphs. Helping the students grow in multiple dimensions. Oh, I love that wording. Critical thinking skills. Real world data. Yes, introducing Jedi connections to data science. Wonderful. These are some great takeaways, and it's exciting to see kind of how they're coming up ranking as well. So communication. So maybe let this go for another 30 seconds or so to kind of see what comes up to the top here. Looks like investigative cycle is definitely coming up there, that entire data analysis process. So communication, data relevant to their lives, understanding context, data ethics, real world data, and the entire data analysis process coming up there on top. Great. So now let's see what some others are going to share with us about that, what they have gathered from this week. So today we've just did the 5-minute introduction of the ideas. We're going to hear about eCOTS. We're going to have 30 minutes, so 6 5-minute talks, talk about the George Cobb Award, and then we'll finish with some parting thoughts.
Great. Are you handing it over to me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you, or assume that you see me, I guess. I'm trying to cover my microwave. I just don't have that cool of background. But I hope you've had a productive and engaging eCOTS experience. And I want to, give a shout out to Megan and Bob and the whole program committee for such a wonderful, for such a wonderful event, even when the technology didn't want to cooperate, and it wasn't your fault at all. I could talk about being nimble with technology and pivoting. I was very impressed, and really, kudos to you all for creating such a wonderful event. As we wrap up this very successful eCOTS, I wanted to get 2023's U.S. Conference on Teaching Statistics on everyone's radar. So Dennis Pearl, our esteemed director of CAUSE, has agreed to let Alan Rossman and myself be the program co-chairs or the co-program chairs. Where does that word co go? I don't know, but it doesn't matter, Kelly, for the US COTS 2023. So you're hearing me right now, not Alan, but don't worry, Alan is there on the slide. So if you don't know Alan, well, there he is holding up a chocolate bar at the Penn Stater, which is where we'll be going back to for an in-person US COTS next year. And so at Penn State. So I want you to just at this point save the date. So the conference will run from the 1st of June through the 3rd with pre-conference workshops the few days before that. So we did also post the website there. It's not that short of a website though, so don't worry. We'll also be sending out reminders throughout the year about the conference. One thing I did want to mention is the theme of the conference. So without critiquing my not very impressive visual there, I want to tell you the theme will be communicating with data, communicating about data. And with this, we mean communication very broadly. So, right, it's not just about writing about data and statistics, but it's also about communicating verbally or graphically and thinking about not only how do we teach our students to explain their statistical results, but also to explain their statistical process. So we'll have more on the theme upcoming, but it was nice to see in Megan's poll everywhere that communication was something that was really key for us to be teaching to the modern student. Okay, so I sure hope that we see you next year in person at the Penn Stater. And if I haven't yet convinced you that you should join us, I just wanted to mention that Penn State does have its own ice cream shop. So I know I will be visiting the ice cream shop to collect data, of course, purely for scientific reasons, but I would love to share a very generous scoop, I can tell you that, a very generous scoop of ice cream with you all next summer. The last thing I'd like to mention is if you'd like to help with any of the behind the scenes work of making US COTS happen, please reach out to Alan and or myself. Or if you have any questions at all about the conference, also feel free to reach out. All right. With that, Megan, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to hear about this, an in-person conference with ice cream and great people to learn together with. That sounds amazing. It's already on my calendar. All right, so now we're up for the 5-minute talks. So we are going to do this, of course, in the Alan Rossman tradition. And so we are going to be doing the talks in alphabetical order by first name. And so Aishi, you're our first. You just let me know when you want me to advance.
Yep, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight, this morning. It's 5 a.m. in Sydney right now. So it's 5 minutes at 5 a.m. Sounds really great. I really wanted to be involved with eCOTS more. However, your sessions were while I was sleeping. I wanted to watch the recorded sessions afterwards. Unfortunately, they weren't available. They didn't download. I was only able to watch posters. So I'm going to summarize a couple of posters and add my comments at the end. You can go for every 30 seconds to next slide, Megan. That's all right. I'll catch up with you. So I watched really interesting posters and what I gathered, you can see on the slides, what I gathered is soft skills are coming up in almost every one of them in one way or another. The one about that you see currently is talking about report writing skills, presentation, but they also do it by using the virtual island developed by Michael Bulmer from Australia as well. So every time I watch Michael's presentation or someone using the island, I really get excited. I really congratulate the authors of doing that, because I understand the time involvement, how much time they would have invested to be able to prepare the classes. And interdisciplinary, it's understandably, it's very common. When Megan was asking, what do we want our modern students to learn? One of the things didn't come up so much on the comments, but interdisciplinary work is at the heart of statistics. Unless you are a theoretical statistician, you work alone in a dark room and with computer or whatever. We always work with others. So these colleagues from one of the universities collected data and sharing it with other stats colleagues to be able to teach their students. And this was from Canada, looking at whether the mathematical skills coming to the first year introductory course made a difference to students' achievements in that course. Not surprisingly, they found that the better the mathematical knowledge, previous mathematical knowledge, the better their learning during the introductory statistics. It might not be necessarily what they know in mathematics, but it might be related to the belief in themselves. They can do it, because when they make maths equal stats, they automatically shut down and stop learning. I love that presentation about thinking what we are teaching students and how we can change things around, because I do see it even in many textbooks. It's about the steps that you should follow, and many students, as highlighted by these authors as well, can do things but don't know what it means. As if like, I can drive the car, but I don't know how it works. In my case, it doesn't matter, but with stats, it matters how it works and what is mean. And I like this as well, which talks about diversity, belonging, and students observe, just looking through the data, how disadvantaged some people are, just because they are in one group or another. And I thought they could add UN Sustainable Development Goals in their future work or other aspects as well. So because when we bring students to think about not just themselves, but everyone else in the world by using certain goals, it might help them much better. Looking after visually impaired students, that was talking to me as if, because this semester I have one visually impaired student as well. I didn't go to the length Annabelle did with using the foil and everything, creating a graphical display, but instead I had to describe the figures. And when I had a histogram or when I had a box plot, I had to tell everything what's in the figure. So instead of having small space for the figure, it was half a page for figures explanations. This mastery, we are using, some of my colleagues are using very similar approach in my university. I still have doubts whether it's a good idea or bad idea. I'm not exactly sure, because it seems like at times the good students are punished with harder questions. It just, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I understand the requirement of mastery, but I'm still unsure. Should we be the ones deciding who should master what, or should the students decide themselves what they want to master? And using AI, I'm really interested in this one. So exciting, because currently through the COVID, we've all used quizzes and things like that, but I wasn't convinced just the quizzes where you only enter a number or drop down menu, we could assess students. So I incorporated open-ended questions as well, where my tutors are marking, because I have more than 1,000 students in the first year course. So therefore, when this is done, I really would like to have a copy of it. I want to use it and compare how my students are marking and whether it works or not. Of course, it's going to be limited to English, but I guess we can start from somewhere. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present. And I also invite you to eCOTS in September. Just fly down to Argentina, Rosario. That'll be there. And one of the topics is about communicating statistics too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your look at the posters. That's a really great combination to look at different aspects of preparing the student. Bob, you're up next.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sound great.
Okay, so I decided to attend as many or all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion sessions that were here because that's something I think I need some help with. Next slide. So self-disclosure, I am old, I'm white, I'm cisgender, and I'm male. So that means I need help. And I need help with ideas of how to bring authentic experiences with DEI into my stats course. I need help building confidence with facilitating discussions around DEI issues. I need examples of data sets, activities, projects that bring DEI into the classroom in a thoughtful, respectful, and purposeful way. Fortunately, there were lots of sessions here at eCOTS that provided some of what I needed. Next slide. So session on normalizing data investigations of systemic racism in teacher education content courses provide a lot of interesting ideas, such as needing to help students move between an individual anecdotal perspective and a structural systemic pattern perspective, the need to be sensitive to students who have experienced systemic racism in our class if we're going to have these kind of discussions, have students hypothesize. It's helpful to have students hypothesize about what patterns they might expect to see if there was evidence of systemic racism, if there was not, before actually looking at data. Have them shuttle back and forth between contextual and statistical spheres, as Maxine Van Cook has written about too. Next slide. And during that session, a lot of people posted in the chat lots of resources. So I tried to capture as many of them as I can, and they're here in these slides for you. Next slide. The next session by Jana Asher on recreating my elementary statistics course for DEI designation. Jana shared with us that she helped develop a 6-module DEI training workshop, which if people are interested in that, I think you should contact Jana. She has something she has students do is create a social identity map. Again, contact Jana about that. That sounds very interesting. And then she came up with 4 learning outcomes that are DEI oriented that tied into statistics. So she wants students to see connections between statistical and DEI concepts, to recognize that social and cultural identity can bias interpretation of results or how that can happen. She has them critique poorly designed studies and discuss ways to improve the designs. And she wants them to understand how statistics can create exacerbate structural oppression of demographic groups. Next slide. I enjoyed the Birds of a Feather JEDI group, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. I hope that this becomes a place where they're going to post a lot of these resources. I personally need training. I need experience. I need experience with doing this in the classroom, holding these discussions. I need lots of reference material, so I hope that they can supply that to us. And then Susan Hollingsworth, during the discussion, I think raised a couple of very good questions. That she proposed we are challenged, or she challenged us to find ways to permeate JEDI throughout our statistics courses, and then asked the question, how does a person who's not trained to lead discussions, how do we go about that? Okay, next slide, please. And then these are many of the resources. I think there's a few I couldn't fit on the slide, but that were brought up during that discussion. Next slide. Then there was increasing student engagement and motivation with culturally responsive teaching by Tiara Stimson. She outlined ways to create a culturally responsive course and classroom, and she presented ideas about different methods, practices, and ways to enhance meaning in the classroom. And what I've written there are just a few of the many, many ideas that she presented. Next slide. In the session on undergraduate students' sense of community and introductory math and statistics courses, Maria Tackett and Shira Viel, I hope I'm saying her last name correctly, presented results from a study that they've done where they administered multiple instruments to measure how students perceive community in the classroom in an attempt to identify practices that promote or hinder that. Oh, can you go back, please? Thank you. And I think they have some interesting results that they found. A sense of connectedness was associated with perceived learning support. Race and ethnicity, the person reported, were associated with sense of connectedness. But grading on a curve and grading on group work, things that maybe arguably promoted competition in the classroom, had negative associations with a sense of learning support. And one of the recommendations is to create a variety of modes of interaction to promote sustained interactions between students. Next slide, please. Another section on social justice is more than just using critical context by Nina Bailey, John Bartux, Carlos Chavez, and Vimal Rao. Three of them talked about how do they go about creating a climate where they can discuss social justice issues. Nina said she makes a disclaimer at the beginning of the class saying, hey, we're going to be doing uncomfortable things in this course. And then she overshares her perspectives. She tries to disclose her vulnerabilities, hoping to make the students comfortable with doing that. Carlos said something very similar. He states his positionality to create intimacy and trust. And then John introduced us to Discord servers, which allows him to set up a whole class discussion groups and smaller discussion groups where it seems that students feel comfortable discussing social justice issues and developing a sense of community. Next slide. These are some of the resources that they discussed and were presented during that time. Next slide. Then there was the grading for equity, reflections and strategies from the 2021 eCOTS reading group members. Each of the 8 panel members presented a different type of method that they use around grading that they felt promoted more inclusion by students. And these all come from things suggested by Joe Feldman, as I understand it. So look into that if you're interested in that. Next slide. And then the session on checking boxes, exploring how race and ethnicity are measured. Cassandra presented some really interesting activities around looking at surveys and the questions that they ask to get people to respond to what is your race, what is your ethnicity, and then challenging students to think about how that creates subjective decisions for analyzing the data, visualizing the distributions, and then challenging them to think of better ways. Are there better ways to ask these questions or to get the data? And then next slide. And that's it. I am done. So I don't know if that was 5 minutes or not, but I'm done. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for that great synopsis of that track. Chelsea, are you up?
Yes, I am. And don't worry, Bob, I won't be 5 minutes. So we'll level each other out. So hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Western Ontario. So I'm from Canada. And kind of the big thing that I took away from the conference this week, Megan, if you wouldn't mind going forward, was connection. Connection was kind of the biggest theme that I took from this, and the various different forms that we have with connection. So Megan, I'm going to ask you to click forward again. What do I mean by connection? I mean connection with ourselves, right? Who we are as instructors, as educators, what's our positionality, our biases, our privileges. I like how Bob noted that in previous sections, we're seeing that our colleagues are doing that within the classroom as well, which is great to see. So yeah, connecting with ourselves and really checking in with where we are. Also connecting with our students, what it is that they need, what they want, where they're headed, where they're coming from. So just really kind of always checking in and connecting with them. The third connection I had was with our communities. I loved seeing different sessions talking about connecting data with outside communities and using different sources to gather that data and look at some really interesting problems. Also connecting with our communities here during the conference. It's been a really great resource, I think, on my end, and I'm sure many of us would agree that we've seen wonderful things and are really excited to try some of them out. The fourth connection I had was with technologies, so both new and older technologies as well. I've seen some interesting new pieces in terms of, new packages within R, but also just new technology as well, like different software that allows us to, host meetings with students and have them pick times, just different pieces like that. So making sure that we're connecting with that technology. And the last one was just with our modern worlds, right? I think this session this workshop really framed it in what are the goals of our community in the present and also moving forward. So how exactly is all of this connection going to come about? Megan, if you click forward, I do actually ask that. And so the one idea that I have, I'll ask you to click again, Megan, is that +1 idea, right? Of choosing one thing that we can do to kind of connect more with ourselves and with our students to help push them into that modern landscape. And the challenge that I have for all of you, Megan, if you'd mind one last click, is what new idea are you planning to implement from this conference? And if you mind putting some in the chat, I think that'd be great. Otherwise, it's just a challenge for you to take with you as you go. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Chelsea, for giving us that challenge, and continue thinking on that. I'll ask you that about that a little bit more later too. So pre-thinking is always good. Jennifer, are you ready?
I am.
All right.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Ward from Clark College, just north of Portland, Oregon, in Vancouver, Washington. And I teach at a 2-year college. I'm also at Portland Community College. And as I was going into eCOTS, I was thinking about my students. So at Clark College, I have students that are called Running Start, where we have high school students that come to the community college and take their classes. And then by the time they graduate high school, they can have an AA potentially and a high school diploma. Then they hop on over to WSU Vancouver for 2 more years, and then they're done with college by like age 20 or something. So the demographic of my students is quite young and inexperienced at life, if you will, because they're maybe 16 to 18 years old. So as I was going through all of these sessions, I was thinking, how can I be a better teacher for them? On the flip side, at Portland Community College, I have such a diverse group of students in terms of how much they're working, they have families, they have so many competing interests for their time that I'd like to make my class more pointed and get them out the door with really useful skills. So if you're like me and you've been through 4 days of sessions, you might feel like you have so many ideas. I have taken so many notes, and I feel like that. Post-it notes all over me. What am I going to do? So curating this list helped me hone down what I found most interesting. Bob summarized some of the sessions really well, so far better than I have here. Diana said in a couple of sessions, what, so what, now what? And so I kind of use that as a theme. What did I find most interesting? Starting off with Talithia Williams. I'm such a fan. I'm just so excited. I felt like I met someone famous, even though I didn't really get to meet her. But what I took away from her talk was tell a story with your own data. So her video about looking at her own temperatures during the month as she was trying to get pregnant resonated with me years ago. And I have that in my own class. And I'm taking that idea and I'd like to develop it into something further where students get to collect data on themselves and then tell their own story. It'd be very personal. And then we can think of all the different ways that students can analyze that data. She brought up COVID vaccine hesitancy, and I believe it was her mom who had said, why would I be hesitant about that vaccine? And she says, let me tell you about Tuskegee, or it was someone in her family who said that. And that reminded me that while I know about Tuskegee, do my students know about this? And keeping that information relevant for all of my students, bring that into the classroom. And she also commented about how students may be part of the data set. So you don't know when you bring in real life data if you're going to be talking about someone who might be in that data set like she had in her own class. Nicole Dalzell and Kieran Evans talked about how to prepare students for a Data Fest. So they talked about making activities that targeted skills. And one of the big questions from a Data Fest that I love, that I'll take back to my own class, is what insights can be gleaned from this data? It's such a general sentence, and I'm not really directing students to work with data. I'm just saying, why don't you figure this out? So I will be using that in my own student projects in class. Sarah Stout had a great talk about finding writing versus process writing. And I find that with my younger students, they're really great at saying, I looked at this, then I did this, and then I computed the average, and the average is 5, without any context. And they're not really telling me stuff about the data. So clarifying that for myself, and then I can clarify it for my students, is something that I'm excited to get going with. So next slide. Nina Bailey and Allison McCulloch talked about the phrase that I really like was, we could take the same graph and have a different lens and then get a different result. So I thought about with students, where are they coming from? What are their lenses? Can I help them identify what their lenses are? And then perhaps there's an activity that can be born out of this, where each student may be comparing the results with other students in the class based on their different lenses. And then just talk about what lenses might there be out there that we haven't thought of, like what lens is not represented in our classroom, because there's plenty of that in our very white area of the United States. Maria Tackett and Shira Veal had great study on community or connectedness in their classrooms. And I would like to take that community connectedness scale and then apply it to my class. So where do my students feel connected in the class? Where could I be improving? And then Nina Bailey and John and Carlos and Vimal were talked about already. So I'll pause, go through there. But Laura Lee's activity, the article review was really great because it gave a structure for my students to look through an article. So one of the goals of the class is be able to read a journal article. And do I know how to do that well enough to teach them? Like, I think I had a good start, but with her activities, I now know where to take my C activity up to an A. So next slide. So now what, if you recall in the opening session, I had talked about gathering some interest in creating a page or a portal on the CAUSEWeb website, kind of like the teaching statistics and health sciences, but have it around social justice and DEI. So I'm looking for, a location to put all these awesome resources that we've been curating and been inspired by in this week. So this is kind of in its infancy. If you're interested in being part of such a team, we're inventing the wheel right here. Please use the bit.ly link and it will message me, and then I'll be contacting people afterwards. I also might be contacting some of you now that I've seen you in some of these sessions, and I know who's thinking along the same lines as I am. So thank you so much, and maybe I'll attend next year in person. I'm on the other side of the US, so we'll see.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Kelly?
Yes. Good. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
you're good.
Right.
You're good.
Hi. So my name is Kelly. I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've taken away from eCOTS. And I have a confession. This is actually my first ever eCOTS. And I know that is probably shocking to some people who probably thought I've been to a number. But I haven't, mostly because this conference tends to fall on my final week of classes. And I just feel like I need to be present for my students, and it's hard to get away. So if you go to the next slide. That sort of points out to me why the E in eCOTS is so important. The access that was available to me to be able to, I missed the breakouts this morning because I was teaching my class on campus, but I've been able to go to a number of sessions, go to posters. That part I mean, on Wednesday, my son's daycare was closed and I still was able to go to every session and present at my own. And so this idea of having access, and I love that Cause has always had this every other year, is something that is deeply important to me. And as a person whose passion is online learning, that access matters for our students as well, right? So our students who are working, who have family obligations, who may have health issues, that giving them that ability to still be able to continue on with their education in an online modality is so very important. And I am very grateful to have this community and this space to be able to do that. So next slide. The C is important to me. I think eCOTS does a really great job of demonstrating how it is possible to build community and connection online. And again, this is one of those things people say, you can't do that in an online class, but my reading group from USCOTS 21, we have never met, and these people are my family. Like if I had questions about anything, I would know I could go to them. And we built all of this connection without ever meeting. And I love that eCOTS has these spaces to connect beyond the conference, right? Asynchronously. So if you are in New Zealand or Australia, somewhere else where the actual workshops were in breakouts or in the middle of the night, you still had the opportunity to go look at posters. You'll be able to go watch the keynotes on the Cause YouTube, and you can connect on Slack. And I know in yesterday's keynote, there was a mention of Twitter. And honestly, if you give Twitter a big enough training set of your data, if you let Twitter know, I don't want anything negative, I just want teaching ideas, R hints, like that's what I want. If you spend enough time giving that training set to Twitter, that's all you're going to get. You're going to just find this place where there's nothing but resources and people that lift you up and inspire you and that help you make your class a better place. And next slide. And then I had to touch base on the S. There was such, as Bob touched on, such a large number of talks in the DEI track. And the fact that we teach a subject where we can easily connect it to students' lives, right? That is a component of every culture responsive teaching, like pedagogy, framework, whatever you have, there is connecting material to the things students are passionate and interested in. And statistics gives us the avenue to do that. So we are so lucky. Thankfully, we had a really great first presentation about those posters. I was going to sell the posters here. If you haven't made it over to the posters, they're not the easiest thing in the world to find in that attendee hub, but they are great 5-minute recordings. And a lot of them really get into social justice or other things that we can be using to help our students connect this material to their lives. So that's my sales pitch on the posters. I am going to yell at Bob for the fact that I had to watch them at 1x speed, which I have not done for a video in a very long time, and it's painful. But that's it. So thank you so much, Megan. I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Kelly. I loved how you tied that to the letters in eCOTS. Nicola, are you ready? Nicola?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm Nicola, and I just want to share with this group some, like any good conference, I'm walking away with lots of questions. And so I wanted to share some of the questions that I've been asking in light of this conference with you. All right, next slide. Talithia's talk really challenged me to think about, how do our students see themselves in the statistics story? You know, are they already interested in participating, or what draws them in? And how can we help them feel like they really belong? Next slide. In terms of identity and just thinking about identity, I think in the pandemic and in global warming, a lot of issues, we kind of see two extreme identities in relation to statistics. On one side, we've kind of got this unquestioning believer, you know, data results are pure, stats is free of human bias, and I believe in what the data say, or our organization is data driven. So it's kind of this elitism, like, and like data is just this like magic stuff that's free of bias. And then on the other end, you know, we've got this complete atheist side where data results are worthless, stats is only human bias. And, you know, the kind of that quote, I don't know who said it, torture the data enough and they'll say whatever you want. I didn't look up who said that, but somebody has said that. And so you kind of got these two extremes. Next slide. And I think what we'd kind of like to be, I'm going to pose it as like a candidate desirable identity or place for students is to be in the middle, sort of a questioning considerer. So these data results do arise from a human endeavor. Different studies have different degrees of worthiness in terms of my trustworthiness of the results. And I have the tools to critique that worthiness. And that's a huge thing, right? For students to walk away kind of feeling like they have the tools to critique for themselves instead of throwing everything out or believing everything they say. So, you know, I'd hope that a student would say something like this: the researchers made many decisions along the way. If they had made different decisions, then they may have come up with different conclusions, right? Thinking about that lens stuff that we've heard about this week. Next slide. So one of my current research projects right now, it's we submit another plug for eCOTS. My collaborators, Kelly Finley and Florian Behrens, you know, we've been working on looking into identity and students' identities in statistics. And a lot of our work is motivated or inspired by this article in the Journal of Learning Sciences. Next slide. And bear with me, this is a fairly long quote, but it's so good, it's worth it. From the journal, they said, physics and mathematics, and I would argue statistics as well, face unique problems in their appeal to students. History, art, and literature are often perceived as subjects that can encourage students to develop their personal orientations and aesthetics. In contrast, in science classes, students are usually not encouraged to pursue or become aware of their personal ways of constructing the content they learn and how that relates to who they are as people. This lack of this kind of personal orientation to the discipline is problematic for the field, not only because students disassociate from science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, and few students pursue careers in science and math, but also because it means few students, regardless of their career path, have an image of science as something personal and a creative human endeavor. And this has really made me ask lots of more questions in relation to identity. Next slide. It's made me kind of wonder, how can we, you know, with this eye on recruitment and retention of students and them identifying as statisticians, how can we help students identify as statisticians? How can we make the field more open to our students' contributions, right? Is statistics open to what they have to bring to the table? Or is it this crusty old discipline that really, you know, there's only one way to do things? And how can we help students see that they really do belong in the discipline? Next slide. Rob Gould talked about these identities from hoteling, and I'd suggest, I think that there's kind of an order to them. We have this kind of consumer that kind of digests information that's been given to them, and then the user that sort of applies methods to come up with conclusions, and then the producer that's kind of developing new methods. Next slide. And Rob kind of suggested that maybe those first two are kind of merged together now with technology tools and so forth. And with that comes great possibility, but also kind of danger in terms of misuse and so forth. Next slide. But I'm just wondering if what I've seen in terms of identity means we should kind of reverse the order of these identifiers, of these identities. What if students first, instead of first being kind of exposed to consumer roles and user roles, what if they started out as producer roles? What if they were creating their own metrics for measuring things? What if they were creating their own ways of displaying information? And I've just been asking a lot of these what if questions. And then after that, would they be better equipped for the user and consumer roles, right? Because they've seen what a human endeavor it is, how you can produce different ways of measuring things, and that may affect your results and so forth. So if we kind of reorder these identities, and if students were producing their own statistics earlier on, producing their own methods, would that sort of change? Would this underscore the human element to statistics, how there's so many decisions that need to be made along the way? And would it help students see the creativity and the possibility in statistics? Next slide. I also would suggest, what if we rebranded these identities? So instead of producer, what if we call them innovators and dreamers, right? Innovators thinking of new ways of measuring things and critiquing them, right? And kind of opening that up. And instead of consumer, you know, which kind of has this idea of you just eat whatever you're fed, what if they were, you know, and instead of users, what if it was explorers and questioners, and for consumers, maybe more like discerners and skeptics, right? Would this invite more students into the story? And would this be a more exciting story for our students to join? So I'm leaving with better questions. Next slide. what does it look like to share ownership of statistics, to let our students help write the story? How can I open up my classroom to let them bring more of themselves into the story and bring their identities in and be shaped by it? And instead of how can we help students believe that they belong, how can we help students see that they really do truly belong? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for some great questions. And we have one more speaker, who's Rebecca Wong, who will be talking to us about impact. Are you there, Rebecca?
I'm there.
Great.
All right. So hi, everyone. I'm currently chair of the AMATIC statistics community, and I wanted to share one way that the AMATIC community is trying to promote continued learning, the kind that we've experienced this week at eCOTS. Several years ago, AMATIC published a document called Impact, which stands for Improving Mathematical Prowess in College Teaching. It's a document basically on best practices in mathematics education at the two-year college level. And to make this a living document instead of one that was published just to sit on the shelf, each academic community takes a month to focus on how impact applies specifically to their community. So the statistics community has sponsored Impact Live for this past month of May. And the committee, which was Mark Early, Kelly Spoon, who just gave a talk in our closing session and who's on the planning committee for this conference, and myself, decided that the focus of our month would be on faculty learning, and specifically on the impact themes of taking responsibility and showing initiative. Taking responsibility to teach an up-to-date students-focused course, and showing initiative by being committed to continued learning. So the month is divided into several components. The first is Impactful Thoughts, which is a blog written by one of our committee members. Second, Impact in Action, which are weekly discussion questions that have focused on things like what are the greatest challenges in teaching the intro stats course and how have you found resources to meet those challenges? What are some of the best sources of professional development that you found? And certainly we've been talking of eCOTS this week. And finally, Impact Plus, which is an article on research and statistics education. And we want to thank Nick Horton for being our guest author for this month. And he wrote a great article introducing people to the Journal of Statistics and Data Science Education, and also linking to articles in the journal that would be specifically relevant to the two-year college audience. I've attended so many inspiring sessions at this conference, and I'm sure you have too. I really love Jennifer's picture on her slides where she was covered with Post-its, because that's how I feel at the end of a good conference too, where I just have so many ideas. But I completely, I agree with Chelsea's challenge to us that, you know, sometimes there's just too many ideas and it paralyzes me at the end of a conference. So just picking the one idea that we want to be sure to think more about and to incorporate as we teach our classes and prepare our classes for fall. I think that was a great challenge. And I'm going to just maybe add on one more challenge to us. I would encourage you to take that extra step of thinking how you're going to share your one idea with a colleague or with a department. You know, are you going to bring it up in a department meeting? Is it going to be a hallway conversation? Maybe you'll write an article for your affiliate newsletter, but somehow taking the opportunity to expand the impact of your learning at eCOTS beyond our own classrooms and our own students. So I leave that to you as a final challenge in our continued learning. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for your information about impact. It sounds like you've had a wonderful month. And now we're going to move on to the award ceremony. So I'm going to stop sharing and give over control to Dennis.
You're muted, Bob. Dennis, sorry.
I don't know which mode actually makes me sound more intelligent, but anyway, I want to second naturally the kudos that everybody has been sending Megan's way. This has been an absolutely spectacular conference, and also to acknowledge the terrific work Bob and the staff do, and all the great presenters and you guys in the audience, because the chat goes on and the ideas keep springing forward. So really, Cause is really blessed to be working with a statistics education community that's so giving of their time and willing to share ideas in a non-competitive way. And it shows so much concern for their students that it really is a wonderful group of people, and that's what keeps things going. And so it kind of makes it a special moment to be able to honor someone with the Cobb Lifetime Achievement Award in statistics education, where these ideals really have shined for a long career. We want to be able to honor someone who's had a really impactful career across multiple contributions over time. And this picture of George here from the 2009 eCOTS, and he also gave very influential talk in 2005 at the very first eCOTS, which is when we honored him with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Sadly, when George passed away a couple of years ago, we, because of his long contributions, we wanted to honor him again by naming the Lifetime Achievement Award after him. So this award has had, really stellar list of past winners. George was the inaugural winner, Joan Garfield in 2007, Roxy Peck in 2009, Dick Schaefer in 2011, Chris Franklin in 2013, Ann Watkins and Mike Shaughnessy in 2015, Danny Kaplan in 2017, Rob Gould and Tom Short posthumously in 2019, and last year, Jessica. We've now gone to yearly, and so this is the first winner of the Cobb Lifetime Achievement Award in an even numbered year. And so I'm really glad to be able to announce the winner. And so this year's winner of the Cobb Lifetime Achievement Award in Statistics Education is Bob Delmas, seen here mentoring the next generation of statistics educators. Yes, is the little hand clapping emoji available? I guess not, but I hope everybody in the audience is clapping, and Bob is there, I know, with us, since he gave the first of these talks. Nominating Bob, Nicola Justice and Andy Ziefler and Liz Fry, and I'll turn it over to them to make a few remarks and then allow Bob to accept the award. So let me stop my share.
See if they can hear. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Okay, good.
Hey, everybody. So my name is Nicola, and I was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota Statistics Education Program, of which Bob is just now retiring from being a teacher, advisor, and leader for many years. And I'm presenting with co-nominators Liz Fry, who was Bob's advisee in the same program. And we prepared this presentation with Andy Ziefler, who's a graduate of the program and a faculty member in that same program. And this image is from a plenary talk that Bob gave at eCOTS 2013 called Bob the Brown and Slightly Gray, a story of magic and change. And Bob put wizard hats on all of his collaborators in the talk. We took inspiration from him and wanted to share with you some of the hats he has worn that make him so deserving of the George Cobb Lifetime Achievement Award in Statistics Education. But I want to start by talking about the hat that Bob's wearing here, borrowing Gandalf the Grey's hat. I want to highlight a different way that Bob is worthy of wearing the hat, one that he never would have said of himself in his own talk. In Lord of the Rings, Gandalf has a way of showing up at just the right time when the hobbits and their friends need help. So also I've experienced with Bob. For example, I remember when my dissertation data was collected and I met with a faculty member in my department for advice on an aspect of my analysis. It was not my advisor or co-advisor, and the person didn't really mean to, but effectively they shot down my research and made me feel like all was lost. And I was crying many, many tears in the recreation center at the University of Minnesota, and my husband was trying desperately to console me when who should arrive but Bob, leaving his karate practice or coming to karate practice. And he sat down next to me, listened to what happened, and helped me realize that all was not lost, not at all. And I didn't need to be so upset. The wizard had shown up at just the right time. Another time Bob showed up was when I was in my last year of graduate school and I'd just given birth to my first son, Gordon. That's the picture that that Dennis showed there. And my folks and my in-laws were on the other side of the country, and we were exhausted from intermittent late nights that often happen with a new baby. But Bob and his wife Rose showed up at our house with a big pan of lasagna, I think it was. And Bob also brought his family rocking chair to lend to us, and he taught us how to rock our baby to sleep. This is not in the job description of a professor, but this is Bob showing up at just the right time when I was at the end of my strength. There are many other times and stories about Bob showing up at the right time at a conference to support his students' talks, supplying food for gluten-free students, or coming through in a collaborative project with an insight, or checking references when no one else has taken the time to do it. And Liz is going to talk a bit more about Bob's kindness in just a minute, but I wanted to set the stage even before I share about Bob's academic accomplishments for those who don't know Bob, so that you have a bit of the context of why I'm so honored to be a part of this award presentation. So now we'll take you through a tour of some of the other hats this hero has worn so well.
Laura.
This hat is the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company hat. And I thought maybe Andy chose this because of Bob's roots in the South, and Bob can do a really good Southern accent. Later, Andy, you told me it's because Bob loves movies. But perhaps another good reason is because in the Forrest Gump story, Bubba Gump has a dream, and Forrest is the one who brings that vision to life. Beth Chance talks about how Bob is so good at this in a message she wrote to me in support of Bob's nomination. She said, "It was so fun to work with Bob and say, wouldn't it be great if we had software that would do this for the students?" And then Bob would create it across several different programming languages. So Bob's really good at bringing something to life and bringing something to fruition. And in Rob Gould's letter of support for Bob, he said it's fitting that Bob is a winner of the award named after George Cobb, because Bob's projects have directly advanced George's vision of a randomization and simulation-based approach to learning statistics. I'm handing it over to Liz. I think she's trying to help Bob.
Liz, you're muted.
Can you hear us now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so these are just some of the many acronyms that represent the best of Bob. You name a statistics education acronym, and he's probably been involved in it. Before teaching with simulation-based inference was cool, he developed the interactive sampling sim program that used simulation to help students learn about sampling distributions. Bob was an integral part of the NSF-funded Catalyst curriculum, a pioneering curriculum that teaches inference using simulation-based methods. Bob has been involved in creating many assessments of conceptual understanding in statistics, such as chaos, goals, and artist. As Nick Horton writes, more than 15 years after the grant ended, these online assessments continue to be used by the community, including myself, as a way to provide low-stakes assessments and practice on conceptual understanding for our students. Bob has also served the international statistics education research community in various ways, including being the editor of Surge for 4 years and being a founding member of SRTL. Bob is wearing a chef's hat here to represent the abundance of ideas and scholarship that he has cooked up over the years. His numerous contributions to books, journals, conference proceedings, presentations, and more have had an enormous impact on the statistics education community all over the world. Countless scholars have cited his work, and thousands of students have benefited from statistics curricula and assessments that he's played a huge role in creating. Many students, including Nicola and myself, have learned a lot from Bob directly, but also, as Holly Lynn Lee writes, many generations of students have indirectly learned from Bob as well. Next slide.
So here Bob's wearing a chief hat because he had to make a lot of tough decisions when he served as editor of the Statistics Education Research Journal for 4 years and associate editor of JSE for nearly 10 years. Gall says that Bob was an editor that during a time when search had an increase in submissions, and that it was important for him to keep up the quantity and the quality, and he did a great job of that. From several sources, I've learned what really sets Bob apart as an editor was that in this critical time of growth for the discipline, he aspired to nurture young international researchers instead of just kind of serving as a gatekeeper. And I know the karate stance makes it sound like he was just a gatekeeper, but it sounds like he was also just a really great mentor and saw it as a chance to mentor as well. And that leads to our mentoring hat. My favorite hat here, his Jedi mentoring hat. Bob has taught me so much, both formally as my teacher, but also as we conducted research together collaboratively. Things like how to respond when our paper was rejected, how to think critically about what's really going on in students' thinking, and just modeling collegiality and what it looks like to be a wonderful collaborator. Jen Knoll has also experienced Bob as a mentor, and she said in her letter of support that he has a willingness to engage with new researchers in the field, providing encouragement while at the same time pushing young researchers in their thinking. And Tim Jacoby talked about this also. Bob sort of taking him under his wing when Tim started the Locus project. Coming from a math ed background, Bob introduced Tim to a lot of players in statistics education. And Tim says his passion for statistics and caring approach to mentorship and collegiality have made an even bigger impact on the field than his work on assessment and teaching at the undergraduate level. And Matt Beckman put it so well when he said, Bob has gently and skillfully brought me along from apprentice to colleague. I can only describe it as a deep-seated, honest humility that good ideas can come from anywhere, even when Bob is clearly the expert in the room.
Although Bob has had plenty of things to keep him busy professionally, he still finds many ways to wear his enjoying life hat. Bob can often be found doing karate, taking trips to beautiful places like the Boundary Waters or the North Shore, or going for walks with his dog Nilla. He's shown here playing the harmonica for his colleagues at eCOTS, but his musical talents don't stop there. Rob Gould writes that some of his fondest eCOTS memories are of Bob ballroom dancing and leading the group in song and dance. I have similar fond memories of Bob leading us in songs during SRTL 8 in Minnesota. And then as Andy Rubin puts it, although Bob's scholarship and intellectual leadership are extraordinary, he stands out as a kind and generous person with much to give and the desire to do so. He's a dedicated servant leader who goes out of his way to help people. For example, he hosted his graduate student, Ethan Brown's parents, when they came to town for his master's graduation ceremony. And I will never forget how during my first year as full-time faculty, while I was still working on my dissertation, I was tasked with teaching a course on becoming a teacher of statistics for the very first time. Bob kindly volunteered to co-teach it with me, even though the course did not count at all towards his teaching load. And then thanks to all of his support, I confidently taught the course by myself the next time that it was offered. And I'm sure that many other members of our statistics education community have stories of how Bob has been a friend to them as well.
This is not a picture of Bob. This is Paul Erdős. He published more papers during his lifetime than any other mathematician in history. And the Erdős number was originally created by his friends in light of his prolific career and skill collaborating with many other researchers. Specifically, the Erdős number is a metric that defines the distance between Paul Erdős and another person as measured by co-authorship in collaborative papers. So someone who co-authored with Erdős himself is assigned Erdős number 1, and someone who has not co-authored with Erdős himself but has co-authored with one of his co-authors is assigned Erdős number 2, and so on. So I have not collaborated with Erdős or any of his collaborators, and I imagine that I either have no Erdős number or that my Erdős number is very, very high, which would indicate that I'm not a very central player with the top publishers in mathematics, and I'm okay with that. But a few years ago, Andy Ziffler proposed a new metric called the Gouldish number to honor a George Cobb Lifetime Achievement Award winner in 2019. The metric is not defined by collaborative papers, but rather by shared meals with Rob Gould and his dinner companions. I have the privilege of having Gouldish number 1 because I ate breakfast with Rob Gould at the SRTL conference in 2017. And my colleagues in the math department here at Pacific Lutheran all have Gouldish number 2 because they've broken bread with me. In picking up this tradition, Andy, Liz, and I met to discuss what might be an appropriate metric for the Delmas number. Andy suggested that perhaps the Delmos number could be the number of tangential threads Bob has taken in conversation with you, the number of times he's been distracted by an interesting story while telling you another interesting story. We also considered it to be related to the arts. So someone who has ballroom danced with Bob has Delmos number 1, and then anyone who's danced, sang, or performed with them would have Delmos number 2, and so on. And that was a top candidate. But where we landed and what I think is most appropriate for the Delmos number would be a metric representing Bob's tendency to help, support, guide, and serve others. So here we'll define the Delmos number. If Bob has lifted you up, encouraged your career, engaged in a conversation that inspired your thinking, introduced you to new thinkers, or helped you overcome, then you have Delmos number 1. I imagine there are many, many people with the Delmos number 1 at this conference. And if you have ever been helped, mentored, coached, encouraged, or lifted up by someone with Delmos number 1, then you have Delmos number 2, and so on. Unlike the exclusive nature of the Erdős number, I imagine everyone at this conference has or soon will have a Delmos number, and the distribution of Delmos numbers among us could be well modeled as a geometric distribution with high probability of success and low probability of failure, with a mode around 1 or 2 and very low variance.
All right, finally, this is a conference on teaching statistics, so we couldn't give up the opportunity to give Bob an estimator hat. After 32 years, this Sunday, May 29th, is Bob's last official day of employment at the University of Minnesota. In a recent course evaluation, one of Bob's students wrote that their PhD level stats course could be improved by, quote, finding a way to let Bob fully retire and still make sure that every student takes this course from him. An impossible ask, but my goodness, am I so glad I was able to get to take this class from Bob before he retires. So we wish Bob many congratulations as he heads off into the next adventure of retirement, and congratulations on receiving the George Cobb Lifetime Achievement Award. So I have the trophy here. It says George Cobb Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Robert Delmos for timeless and continuing contributions to the improvement of statistics education. Congratulations, Bob.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, am I supposed to say something? I'm in tears. This is overwhelming. I'm in tears because I'm.
There's something else for you.
Oh. Okay. Am I supposed to open this? Oh, and this is a from my family here, from my stat ed family here, a book of memories, thoughts, beautiful, thank you. And I'm in tears for several reasons. I'm overwhelmed. I wish my wife could be here. She supported me so much through all this. So I wish Rose was here. I'm overwhelmed by the thoughts and everything you've shared and the evidence that you've all been paying attention, which I just really appreciate. It's also been an interesting week for me. I'm in a new relationship with a wonderful person whose daughter just gave birth last night. And that meant a few sleepless moments in that. So maybe that's contributing too. Thank you to all of you here and afar for this honor. It is truly a privilege. What a wonderful way to end my career. And that's what I'm going to end with. Just thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'll turn it back to you guys.
Congratulations, Bob. Well earned. I want to give us some last parting thoughts, if I may. I want to give some thanks to the organizing committee, who you didn't see them working ferociously in the background, but they were. And I thank them for that. I'm sorry, I It's coming to the end of the week and I also want to thank Bob. He doesn't have a descriptor by his name on purpose because I honestly couldn't think of one that would be appropriate. He has helped so much from the beginning to the end. So thank you. So as we end, here are some last thoughts. Last summer with my reading group, we decided to read Defink's Significant Learning Experiences. And he talks about, we all hear about sage on the stage and guide on the side. And I have to admit the guide on the side, I saw the point, but I didn't quite connect with it. It felt wrong, not quite right. But this made sense to me. My students and I are on a river of learning. It's a river I've been on. I know where things can get tough and I know where things can get easy, but we all have to get there. And they are as much on the raft as I am. We have to work together. I have to listen to them, and they need to take some of my wisdom with me. So thinking of this, of a guide in the raft, we've all gotten off of our rafts to join this conference and learn how to help prepare these new students for their experiences. We've learned how to give them these skills, whether it be how to connect in a community, some old or new skills to be modern data scientists, statisticians, consumers or producers. We've talked about how to increase data acumen. We've worked on how to prepare these modern students so that when they go off paddling on their own, we have given them their best at traversing these new rivers. Whether they be long and windy or rough and rocky, they're prepared. I promise we didn't arrange this, but one of the speakers said, Chelsea, pick one thing. Rebecca said, report it out, share it. And I'm going to add one more thing. Pick a companion for that new thing. Someone to talk about it with, to compare notes, and to make it better. Share this in the chat now. What have you been thinking about? What are you going to do? Once you have those thoughts, post it in the chat, because writing it down means you're that much close to making it happen. Once again, thankful. I'm so thankful for such a wonderful community, for us coming together for these experiences, to learn, to help with our students. And so until we meet again, happy rafting and happy teaching the modern student. Thank you, everyone.